So one piece of big news in the crypto space today is that Crypto.com have decided to sue the SEC. They're suing Gary Gensler, the SEC, and all of the commissioners, basically for injunctive relief. And this is because the SEC issued Crypto.com with a Wells notice, which is basically a notice that the SEC gives to organizations which are seen as being in violation of the rules. And it's basically like an intent to prosecute. It serves as that. So CDC received this on August the 22nd, and obviously they've been sitting on it for about 6 weeks now, and now they've decided to fight back. I think that CDC are trying to position themselves in a way that Ripple also tried to, as the champions of the crypto industry, or at least the crypto industry in the US, and they claim to be fighting for the rights of US crypto consumers. So let's dive in and take a look at what's behind this Wells notice and also some of the likely consequences. The SEC, when they issued this Wells notice, we don't know the precise details of it, but what we do know is that it concerns secondary market sales of certain network tokens, excluding Bitcoin and Ethereum. Obviously, they have been designated as commodities already, and they already have ETFs, so there's no point for Gary Gensler and the SEC to, take any action regarding Bitcoin and Ethereum. But basically, all the other tokens that CDC lists, a huge cornucopia of them, could be involved in this, and we don't know which ones. It is not specified. CDC have not told us. I'm sure CDC actually know, and the SEC did in fact make a list and tell them, but Crypto.com have chosen not to disclose this. I don't know why that would be. Maybe it's just because they want to avoid any kind of adverse effect, any kind of negative market action in specific tokens. So as with the Coinbase case, which the SEC launched in June of 2023 and still isn't resolved, the SEC are basically alleging that CDC is operating as an unregistered broker-dealer for certain secondary market securities. And to be honest, there could be some real justification there. I mean, if you look at the kind of stuff that Coinbase lists and the kind of stuff that CDC lists, especially what CDC lists, there are a lot of projects which, would be regarded as ship coins, let's call them. Stuff which isn't exactly high caliber. And the circumstances under which these projects were launched, their white papers and stuff like that, their pre-mines that they have, and also the fact that many of them contain staking and ways to earn the tokens. I think that this could likely be the source of it. I really don't know. Obviously, there are a variety of options. The SEC has historically been annoyed with crypto platforms for offering interest, even on stable coins, like USDC, for example. They have been irritated by staking protocols, anything that you can get staking rewards from. They don't like it. It could involve CRO itself, which historically the company ran and it had a staking program. They've made some efforts to try to decentralize that and move away from controlling it now. So that might be because they feared that the SEC might take some action in that regard. But of course, the SEC are quite within their rights to prosecute a company for historical violations. I mean, it was only a couple of years ago. They could definitely go after them for that. But to be honest, I think that it probably has to do with maybe we can say cheap hot alts. Some kinds of altcoins which CDC has chosen to list. Probably not the kind of things that most people would want to buy. Certainly I wouldn't touch them. But these things are a bit murky sometimes. And how closely has CDC actually looked at these projects and looked at the tokenomics of the project and how they operate to ensure that they're not securities? I really don't know the answer to that question, but obviously the SEC has the opinion that some of them are securities. CDC is not an American firm. They are based in Singapore. Binance obviously was also an overseas exchange, which the SEC also are going after. I think there's somewhat of a movement in the US to favor Coinbase, which of course is in league, some would say in league with BlackRock, and is the custodian of their ETF, and try to push out other competitors from the US market. So, I mean, we obviously had the Binance US incident in the last couple of years where they've been pushed out and have much reduced market share. And now it seems to be the turn of CDC. But that does not mean that the complaint against Crypto.com is wrong or illegitimate. It very well could be. So turning attention to the outcomes here, I think that none of them are good for Crypto.com. I mean, the best case would be that this goes on for another few months and, I mean, maybe Trump gets elected, he appoints a new SEC commissioner and they decide to drop the case. They have some new legislation covering all crypto in the US, and it basically goes away. The only expense will be the legal costs for CDC, and for the next few months until January 20th anyway, or wherever it gets done, you would probably see a depressed CRO price because there's a cloud hanging over the company during that period. I think that's best case. Slightly worse case is that this turns into a lengthy legal battle like the Ripple case, and it costs CDC tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars in legal fees in order to fight the SEC. And during that time, there will of course be a massive cloud hanging over the future of the company, which is likely to deter any investors from choosing CDC, or at least American investors from choosing CDC as their crypto platform of choice. And will also have a depressive influence on the price of CRO. If this thing goes on for 2 or 3 years, it's hard to see it as a positive for CDC, even if they eventually win it. I mean, Ripple basically won their case against the SEC, or substantially won it, and it hasn't really benefited the price of XRP massively, has it? I think that something which is going to happen probably in the next month or two is that there actually is an enforcement action from the SEC. Now, until now, we've got the Wells notice, which is like a preliminary warning to the company, and then we've got CDC suing the SEC, to try to get ahead of this. But we actually haven't seen the SEC enforcement action where they'll publish the accusations basically against the company. I think they're going to do it. If CDC wants to fight, then I think the SEC aren't going to back down from this. So I wouldn't be surprised in a month, for example, to see an actual enforcement notice from the SEC outlining all of the objections they have to the conduct of Crypto.com. Is that going to be good? Well, it's hard to see how it is. Unless it's just like obviously hollow, which I doubt, it's definitely going to have a negative effect on people going to CDC as their provider of choice for exchange services, and of course on the price of CRO. Discussing what I think are the most probable outcomes in this case, unless CDC is somehow saved by the Trump administration getting into office and keeping their word on crypto, making sure that nobody gets prosecuted, what I see happening is this. Situation A, Crypto.com pays a fine to the SEC, which will probably be substantial. They withdraw the offending tokens or products or whatever offerings they have that the SEC doesn't like. They apologize, and then they go on their merry way and continue to operate in the US. That would obviously be the better of the two outcomes. Option B is basically that CDC decides to leave the US market. Probably they'll pay a fine, but they'll still leave the US market just to avoid any future litigation with the SEC. This is basically what happened with platforms like Nexo, for example. Now, the US market is, of course, the biggest in the world, and CDC is heavily invested in trying to, garner more US clients. So I don't see them opting to pay a fine and leave the US market. I don't think that that's going to be the path that they want to tread. However, it might ultimately be out of their hands. I don't know. But one thing that I can definitely say with certainty is that this Wells notice, the pending enforcement action, and future litigation around this is just going to create bad news coverage, basically. I don't think the attempt of CDC to position itself as a champion of the crypto industry is going to be successful. I see this as a bad news event. It's going to cast a cloud over the company for months, if not years. I think it will have a negative influence on the price of CRO. I really do. So if you are a CRO holder and looking at the chart, if you're a CRO holder, you're probably well underwater already, but you might want to consider what kind of influence this is going to have on future price action over the next year or two, because if you look at, for example, the Ripple situation, it might not be positive in terms of the token associated with an entity which is engaged in litigation with the SEC. Alright, that'll do it for this video. I hope people found it informative, and I'll see you soon in the next one.